Hey, so it's been about a week or maybe a week and a half since I've recorded a vlog, but I've tried several times. I just couldn't get anything that I was happy enough with to actually use, and this may end up on the cutting room floor also. I have a lot on my mind tonight, but a lot of it is also not necessarily coherent in the sense that it has a universal theme to it. I've been thinking a lot about Richard Garriott, Overlord British, the creator of the Ultima series, because I've reread his, or listened to, because it's technically an audiobook, a version of his autobiography, Explore, Create, I think. I can't remember. That's the hard part with audiobooks, since you don't have it in your hand all the time. It's harder to remember the titles, but I've listened to it like 5 times. But it's a solid book. I've never actually finished one of his games, but I find him to be the most charismatic creator of video games, possibly, if only because the era he belongs to had so much has so much novelty to it. It created, in a lot of ways, the indie scene, the idea of authorial intent with video game creation. But it also was the one with some of the biggest returns financially for the creators, because there was no real industry and they invented it. That being said, Ultima 4, 5, and maybe, I would say parts of, yeah, I would say 5 and 4 and maybe 3, for different reasons, are the ones that interest me the most. I actually have been thinking about playing Ultima 4 recently. I own it, but I played it on the NES for about an hour last night, and I was intrigued by it, but I think I'd rather play the IBM port on GOG, or Good Old Games, which I also have. So I think I'm going to give that a shot over the next week. Games are something I'm obsessed with, but I'm also not got actually that much experience with on a creative level. I've made several games, but they're not games in the I'm dedicated to the outcome of how they're perceived kind of level of dedication. Uh, like on itch.io, there's several Choose Your Path games, and there's also about 6 or 7 little zine RPG things, most of which are not fully play tested, if at all, aside from Esper Troopers and parts of Starpunks, which Starpunks is based off a game I played with my uncle, and I adapted it to a setting for a novel I've been developing for about five years now. And Esper Troopers is also in that setting, but it's a game that was easier to playtest because it's a skirmish miniatures game. And both of those are the only ones I'm relatively proud of, but even then, they're not fully play tested. They're incoherent messes of games. That's what's been on my mind, is the idea that sometimes creativity has a compulsion, a desire to make, is a missed opportunity. Sometimes the world's better without. When in a world where so much exists, and it sounds blasphemous to my own ideals, because I really don't want to believe this, but I've been harassed online enough for just trying to share a casual opinion that I have doubts that everything we make necessarily needs to be shared, and that just because we need to share something doesn't mean we need to create a half-baked idea to share it, or something like that. But I disagree with it also. I mean, I do it all the time. I compulsively create things aware of the flaws in them. And sometimes I'm proud of them. Some of the recent music I've done under the name Mason Andrew Freak on, all the sites it's on Spotify and all that stuff, I'm proud of the last about 100 and something songs I put out. There's a novella I wrote called Lantern Soul that I'm very proud of. Even though it's not for everyone, it feels like Jodorowsky on the page, or El Topo, my favorite movie. And I mean, I'm not trying to just like humble brag, because again, a lot of people don't like a lot of what I've made. But I've had enough response to some of it that I know that it's competent at times, and that it doesn't matter if it wasn't, if that makes sense. In a strange way, there's a quality of when you have something to actually say, you say it without regrets, in spite of how it's received. And I say that not because it's good inherently, because it could be horrible, but because you have to have the faith in what you're doing when you need to do it. I think the things I don't fully understand why I make them is stuff that I play with to understand why I'm creating those projects at work. And I don't know if it's wrong to share things that are half-baked or not fully matured in the development of their ideas, because of the simple fact that it's how I socialize. So I love creativity, and like this right now, this is a kind of half-baked thought. Should I share this? I don't know. I'll decide, and you'll decide when you watch it. If you never watch it, then there's no decision to be made. And if you don't make it this far, there's really no decision to be made. And if I decide that it's not worth sharing after I record all of it, none of this is relevant. I mean, that's the strange thing about it. There's so many processes in the act of sharing anything. The act of, especially in the performative nature of modern culture. And I mean, there's something to be said about performative cruelty, because there's people who are aware that they have little they want to create, and their impulse is to destroy. And I don't mean this vindictively. I just mean that in the performative nature of how life works now, with 1,000 cameras around everywhere, and the viral YouTubers running around doing goofy stuff, and you never know when you're part of a skit or you're just chilling with a bud. And it's like, it gets goofy. It gets really goofy. I mean, on some instance, how we try to approach all this is kind of crazy, because like, we're confronted with performative BS so often that our instinct is to act cruel when confronted with anything out of the ordinary. And that is because we anticipate the joke is on us. So we instinctively condition ourselves to be hostile to the world. The problem is that online that doesn't really count the same way. I mean, everyone should have the right to share a casual opinion. And I feel like that's why social media has failed us, is because it's not social media, it's in the social media in name only. It's performative cruelty. We're competing with news organizations, viral memes, sharing viral memes as if they're something we thought of, or mocking as if someone else takes credit for some BS that they don't have any connection with other than they click repost. And I mean, it's kind of hilarious and sad in a very funny way, because what's happened is we're so disoriented to how to approach our own desires and needs to express ourselves that it's buried under a capitalist compulsion to buy in spite of not wanting any of the products sold. And that resentment towards anything shared is, I guess, what's fundamentally on my mind. It's this idea that I want to share with the world like a conversation, but because of my problems, I have a hard time doing that in person, or I don't fully understand how to really just socialize, like chill. And I don't know. I just think that there's something to be said about just casually saying this is not life changing. This piece of thing you're watching is not a 2 hour composed video essay with a script I spent 6 months working on. This is just me communicating to a random person on the internet, hey, it's okay to communicate random information. I mean, and that's not an invitation to be cruel. It's not an invitation to be hostile. And it's not a dismissal of that hostility. It's an ambiguous statement. Only so far as any statement we made relies on the receiver of it to decide its intent. Or something like that. It can never be, it's a never ending little whirlpool of BS when you get down to it. If you want to, you can think your way in circles. Like rowing a boat with one oar. And it's like, sometimes externalizing a thought is healthy in spite of the fact that it doesn't add anything to the world aesthetically. But that doesn't mean it's adding nothing to the world. It just means that as an aesthetic work, it's back to Richard Garrett, for example. Most of his games are the equivalent of digital cave paintings. They are so primitive and unrefined that they have very little merit in comparison to the average crap AAA game that is designed by a committee and peer group testing and all this crap that makes all of them so generic. But it's also, in a strange way, responsible for them. It's that undeserved high five to someone having a bad day. That's what Ultima feels like, kind of, strangely. Or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm going to wrap it up because it's going on a little long. I could probably ramble a little longer, but I just find that I'm trying to do this once a week now because I've tried for the whole week and I've been unable to record anything. So hopefully on every Saturday or Sunday I'll have a vlog up. If not, then just assume I changed my opinion on my instinctive stance and decided that reaching out into the dark is not always the most positive of experiences. I mean, it's hard. You want to be kind, you want to be diligent in that kindness, but we want to be smart, but we don't want to, or we want to be kind, but we don't want to be stupid. That's the David Lynch quote. We want to be kind, but we don't want to be stupid. And that, I mean, that kind of sums it up. That's the posture towards socializing. That is probably the safest in most circumstances to have. So on that, peace and love. Take it easy. Have a good day.